You're ready.
Sure. So welcome everyone to the Broward MPO Executive Planning Meeting. And I don't have notations for the executive meeting. So if please help us out here.
Certainly, this is the call to order first. It's May 10th. It's approximately 8:40 a.m. It's the meeting is called to order, and we first have the roll call. I'll do that if you like, or
That would be great.
okay. We have Chair Ortis is not present. Vice Chair Good,
Present.
Deputy Vice Chair Johnson, Broward County Representative Furr, absent. And we have Small Municipalities Representative Ziotti, and at-large Representative Colburn, and at-large Representative Lynn Stoner.
She's
Okay, so we'll show her. I did see her. We'll mark her down as being present. And so that's the call to order. And Madam Chair, you can proceed with the approval of minutes.
Yes, thank you so much. So may I have a motion for approval of the minutes for February 10th?
I'll motion to approve.
It's been moved by Johnson and Ziotti seconded. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye or hit the, do you want us to hit, use the?
Quickly.
Please, we don't have your mic on. Let's make sure that we are.
Are we using the device for?
yes, please.
For this? Okay.
Oh,
no,
we don't want to? My apologies. They do not want to use this.
Okay, we like the old fashioned way.
Wait once,
1 second, your microphone's not on.
Yeah.
gentlemen, if you can put the mic on.
It's us women, yes.
Well, they're in for a ride.
And now you have notes.
I got it. I appreciate it.
Okay,
Okay. Oh, I'm on. Okay.
there we go.
Just for point of record, when we initially received the agenda with the minutes that were enclosed were incorrect. I did call Rachel and she corrected it. I just want to point that out.
I'll have a conversation with the Director of Transportation who perfectly reviews everything every time.
It was actually the minutes from the previous month. It wasn't for.
My apologies
No,
for
that's
that
okay. It was
completely,
corrected
because
and
ultimately the
that's-
buck ends here. So,
So
you
it's
know,
an administrative
Error.
matter that-
Absolutely. But I just want to point it out in case somebody did notice and it wasn't mentioned. So
But-
otherwise, yes, I
Appreciate
second
it.
it.
So we had a motion by member Johnson and a second by member Ziotti. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. For the
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. We have the approval of the agenda.
awesome. Actually, do you want to do 2 excused absences? It's not on the agenda, but since Mayor Ortis said
I have
called
a
in.
motion to excuse member Chair Ortis and member Furr.
Thank you.
Motion
Second.
to approve by member Colburn, second by, I'm sorry,
Second.
member Ziotti. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Do we have any public comments today?
The approval of the agenda, was it?
Yeah,
approved?
do we
Yes,
have a
I do.
motion to?
Approve the agenda.
Thank you.
So it was moved by member Ziotti, seconded by? Over here by member Colburn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All opposed, motion carries. Do we have any public comments for today's executive committee? Seeing none, move forward with the agenda and we have an action items.
Perfect. This is a, Alan, go ahead. I'm sorry. I was about to do your role.
Motion to recommend Broward MPO approve the agreement between the Broward MPO and White House Group for advancing strategic initiatives RFP number 2202 in an amount not to exceed $2 million.
Thank you, staff.
Actually, I'm going to do a quick presentation as well, because you're also making recommendation to the MPO full board to approve this.
Yes.
Is the task work order number 1, which is between the MPO and White House Group for strategic business plan update, an amount not to exceed $90,000. And that's over a 2-year pay period, or 2 budget years. So we would start this fiscal year, which ends in June, and then it would pick back up, that same contract pick up in fiscal year 23. Can we have the PowerPoint put up? Is it not in there, guys?
Do we need to do a change video?
Yeah, that's what I'm going back and forth too, waiting. There, well, it's MTech. We have one more. That's not the right video. Yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. We're stealing it from the other agenda. Nice. All right, there we go. Advancing strategic initiatives. And you're going to see this again in about an hour and a half. Basically, next slide, please. The position of basically what the strategic initiatives has done for the MPO and will continue to do is position the MPO for change. And really where this is important is this is how we grow within the new transportation bill, the IIJA, which has other roles for the MPO to fulfill in its mission. So by receiving consultants' assistance in this, it will help build that bridge between what we have been doing and where we need to do for the next 5 years. Support of the implementation of all of our core products. The core products remain the same, however they grow. So we have the TIP, the PPP, Transportation Improvement Plan, the Public Participation Plan, as well as the MTP, which you'll see today, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Those core products never change for us. That said, also our Unified Planning Work Program, which you're going to see a presentation on that as well. There are more things that we've been asked to do. One is to get into conversations about land use and affordable housing, as well as environmental sustainability. So those are the things we're going to also have to research and figure out how we're going to partner. And we know that, you know, Broward County, as well as the Regional Planning Council, also does work in these areas. Same thing with the, I think there's 8 or 9 housing authorities here in Broward. There might be more. And so we're going to be working with them as well. So that's where we're looking for the consultant help as well. This is important to also note in these this particular effort is the city of Miramar and the city of Tamarack have reached out to us on the strategic business plan contract and would like to be able to use that vehicle to bring in White House Group to provide that services to them as well for strategic business planning. They've also done City of Hollywood previously with contract work. This basically will put the MPO in position to make sure that we can actually secure additional federal funds. And as you both know, or everyone knows here, the IIJA has half $500 billion worth of discretionary funding. And that's important for us to be able to bring ourselves and our partners to prepare to receive that additional money. Next slide, please. If you all remember, we have a strategic business plan that was adopted on May 11th, 2017. And we were going to start doing amendments to that during COVID, but you know, that was not necessarily an effective time to actually deal with the strategic business plan because most of this needs to be kind of a personal in-person conversation. The update that we're planning on doing now with the very first task work order is looking at the mission and vision to make sure it aligns with the IIJA. Look at our goals and objectives and timelines, again, to ensure that it lines up with the recently passed bipartisan infrastructure bill. Where should the MPO focus its resources? We have some conversations that we're going to have today on the UPWP, but it's also going to be where we take additional resources and move forward. And then looking at the new opportunities. And that's always something that, you know, strengthens and grows the organization and then provides our team members here with opportunities to expand their professional skill sets. Next slide, please. Board support, and this is actually one of the very important things that we get out of this particular contract, is actually kind of lines up the support of all the local governments for different planning efforts. It develops funding and business plans for our partners as well as the MPO. It puts in that vision and mission statement. And honestly, the biggest thing that I see out of it is facilitating the board engagement forums. It's actually getting you all talking to each other to move forward in the reference of importance to the organization, and then ultimately developing board training. And so that's for the board members to be able to better understand the jargon that's going on, as well as how we partner with not just here in Southeast Florida, with the county, with the school board, with FDOT, with USDOT. It actually expands those training opportunities. So that's what we're looking forward with this as well. Next slide, please. Providing on my side of the table, management support. That's also very important. You know, we actually run a fairly lean organization. While we're one of the largest in the state, we aren't one of the largest in the country. And we do compete against Denver and San Diego and Washington, D.C. for funding, and it's important to have that additional support for staff in actually looking at skill sets, making sure that we have the right resources available to pursue funding and to assist our partners in pursuing funding. Next slide, please. This strengthening the position, this is also important. If you look at what the board already supports, whether it's at the regional or statewide level, the national collaboration that we do with the Southeast Florida Transportation Council, that's also known as SEFTEC, BEAMFER is the member for that. MPO Advisory Committee, that's the folks around the state. Commissioner Johnson, you're a member on that board. We actually also look at areas where we can lead in the region and the state and the nation with cutting edge programs and products. We actually have a statewide freight committee that we actually move forward with every year with all the 26 other MPOs in the state and the Florida Department of Transportation on funding from the last bill as well as the current bill when it comes to freight management and movement. So we're able to actually help the state manage projects moving forward, whether it's at Port Canaveral or Port Everglades or Port Miami. So everything's integrated together. That was something that several previous boards had been very active in making sure happen. And the state has become accustomed to us having that leadership area. Next slide, please. Was that it? One more slide. Very good. Position for change. And I want you to focus on this as well. This is the $2 million over the 3 years. This is a 3-year plus 2 contract. These are the numbers that we believe we'll be spending for this contract in different areas. So the task work order, you can see right there in the budget position, it is actually dealing with the first task work order and then really the support for the board. And that's where I want to focus a little bit on. It's new business lines to support local governments, developing funding and business plans, develop policies and procedures and programs, facilitate board engagement, and then board training. And you can kind of see the funding that kind of plays out over the next 3 years. That money is somewhat identified in the UPWP, but Brian will go into a little more detail because like everything else here, there's a lot of nuance because of the federal government not adopting the omnibus funding bill that actually was passed last night in the House, but I'm sure our advocates will have some conversation on that. If you look on the development of the MPO, that's basically with staff. It's actually staffing levels and skill sets. So there's recommendations from the consultant is going to be, do you have the right staff? Do you have too many staff? Do you have too little staff? What do you need to be able to do? And then develop new policies and training programs for that staff, for the entire staff. If you look at the MPO's position, the statewide and national collaborative efforts, that $75,000 is basically what we do on the freight side. And then identify areas where the MPO can lead the region, state, and nation. We put in $100,000 for this fiscal year, nothing the next, and then another $50,000 in fiscal year 25. I want to actually focus on that last line for one quick second because that is probably one of the most unique opportunities. Miami-Dade TPO and I, the executive director, Eileen Bouclé, and I have discussed potentially doing some facilitated travel to meet with folks over in the EU to discuss how they actually fund transportation projects utilizing their funding methods versus the way we fund transportation projects here in the United States. I think that's going to be a great educational opportunity and provide the board members, probably likely the executive board members, with that opportunity to have a different learning experience outside of the United States. The other thing that also leads for is what we're going to be looking to with Miami-Dade as well. And you'll hear this overall in the next year and a half. Miami-Dade is also looking, and I'm going to use the word tunnel. They're looking at tunnel opportunities in Miami to actually move traffic, not necessarily the rail. And so at Brickell in downtown Miami, they're actually looking to remove the bridge, the vascular bridge in downtown by Brickell that connects into downtown Miami and actually put a tunnel in that location. They've also identified several other locations where they'd like to put tunnels in to actually facilitate traffic movement. For my friends in the Southwest there, Miramar and in Pembroke Pines, that's an opportunity. Instead of maybe an overpass, we look at underpasses. There's other ways, or tunneling under the road. There's other ways for us to handle traffic. If it can be done in Miami-Dade, it can be done here. And if it can be using federal dollars, that's going to be something we're going to need to look at. So that strengthening the MPO's position is going to be the area that we're going to really focus with how we partner with Miami-Dade on innovative techniques to be able to deal with transportation issues. And I think that's the last slide. Is that? Yes. So any questions?
Any questions?
Yes.
Member Ziotti?
Yes, at the first slide, you mentioned that the city of Tamarack and the city of
Miramar.
Is that available to smaller cities?
Any city that has an interlocal agreement with the MPO to share resources, it's available to anyone. So the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none? Okay. We go on to the second.
So Madam Chair, we're looking for a recommendation.
Oh, we are?
Yes, so we can bring it forward to the board, the full board, in a few more minutes. But
Okay.
there's actually two items. There's the main item A, which is the actual underlying contract for the $2 million that I announced. And the second part is a part of once you approve the main contract, is a work order for $90,768.24, a part of what you heard from earlier from Greg.
Can we take the two items
You can
together?
take them together and just move them as one.
Okay, so may I have a motion then for items A and B
So
to
move.
approve? Second. So it was moved by Member Ziotti, seconded by Member Johnson. Any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Both items A and B have been approved. You have any federal and state?
Yeah, I think we have the federal. Do we have the federal folks online? Okay. Can we bring up the federal folks?
Hello, good morning.
Hey, good morning.
How is everyone? So going to give a quick update of what's happened in Washington this week. As Greg has already mentioned this morning, we have the House passing a $1.5 trillion omnibus appropriations bill last night. They got that done between 9 and 10 p.m. last night, which also includes a relief package to assist with Ukraine. We're all very thankful to finally see this bill reach the finish line here, because then we got to move quickly on to FY 2023. But the good news about getting this to the finish line is all of some of the new programs that the IIJA, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law from November, a lot of those programs were waiting for final funding approval from Congress in this omnibus appropriations bill. So now that this is near the finish line, we're going to see a lot of those discretionary grant programs that Greg just talked about actually get funded and be opened up for new opportunities for the MPO to apply for. So just quickly, I just kind of want to give a quick overview on some of those funding levels. So first, we're seeing USDOT have its budget bumped up to $103 billion. This is $16.2 billion above last year's funding level, so a significant boost. We are seeing $57.5 billion for the Federal Highway Administration to administer the Highway Trust Fund months. So this is your Surface Transportation Block Grant funding that goes down to FDOT. There's an additional $775 million for the RAISE grant program. This is a discretionary grant program formerly called Build and Tiger. That is, the application period is open now with already $1.5 billion available for funding. So this $775 million will be on top of that $1.5 billion that's available. There is a brand new program called Thriving Communities. It's a new technical assistance capacity building program, and that's set at $25 million. 625 for the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure Safety Improvements Program, CRISI. 1.9 billion for the new PROTECT program. So this is a new program created in the IIJA to help rebuild our transportation networks to be more resilient and withstand the effects of climate change. And 1.23 billion for a new carbon reduction program to curb greenhouse gas emissions. And that's on top of all of the funding that's available for new EV infrastructure and additional funding for transit. So it's good news. Now that the House has passed it, just kind of real quick on process. It will go before the Senate now. They have a couple of days to for the Senate to vote on it. We did pass another short-term CR through March 15th that will give the Senate the time to work through their process on this without fear of the government shutting down. So we're expecting this will be signed into law by the 15th. And then we'll pivot really quickly to FY 2023 and go back through the appropriations process and seeking community project funding for a couple of key projects that the MPO is looking to have funded. So that's it in a nutshell.
Stuart, anything you want to add?
No, actually, I know it was a late night for Lisa and Lori, and I know it's going to be with the Senate is going to be fun too.
Yeah.
There's some other issues going over on the Senate that they want to do some amendments, which is why they did a quick CR as well, a continuing resolution. So I think, what is it, Tuesday, Wednesday, we think we might have signature?
By Tuesday.
So that's actually a really good thing. Now, this is going to feed into our UPWP conversation later as well. So please try to remember this. And if you can help guide the others during the regular board meeting, that would be very helpful. So that way they understand that, you know, you were briefed on how the federal monies are kind of strangely flowing around and getting there. So be prepared. Lori, Lisa, thank you. Or Lisa, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Great. Have a great day. Stay safe, and we'll see you the first week of April.
Sounds good. See you then. Bye.
We're going to be going up to meet with USDOT staff at the beginning of April on all the new programs. One of particular note is actually that carbon reduction program, because that's going to be a new formula funding program that we're going to have to be dealing with. And the other one is Protect, which is a formula funding program as well, which means we're going to have to be prioritizing all of those monies as well. So looking forward to all of that. Oh, okay, perfect. Before we get into MTech, I want one more thing, which is the state advocates. Are we on? Can we pull them up, please?
Head shaking.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, last week of session.
Yes. Well, so we were supposed to be wrapping up tomorrow, but they didn't get the budget finished until last night, probably around 7 p.m. The budget has yet to be printed. They just came to an agreement on where they are, but it is yet to be printed. So whenever the budget is actually printed and on their desks, they have a 72-hour cooling off period. We're expecting them to actually finish on Monday, and they would likely be adjourning on tomorrow as planned, but then return on Monday to take that budget vote, kind of similar to as they've done in years past. It was a little bit of a curveball. We had expected everything to go very smoothly, as it's done in the 3 prior years. The governor, the Senate president, and the Speaker of the House have gotten along very well with each other, and they've always seemed to do a really good job of passing and supporting one another's priorities. This year, it actually there was a lot of tension between the three that began to spill towards the end of the legislative session. And we saw a lot of that tension start to play out with the budget. And they were finally able to bring it in for a landing last night. Once it gets printed, we'll be able to see a lot more of where all the different items shook out. Right now, there's just like little pots of money in various offers, but they did fund a $200 million for a fuel tax holiday, and they actually made that contingent on ARPA funding. And so that was not in the final tax package. The tax package agreement was $450 million. And so this is in a separate thing that's part of the ARPA funding agreement that they came to. And they have about $3.5 billion that they've put towards different various initiatives in that. And that also included $200 million of resiliency grants. However, I believe that there's more than just that for resiliency grants. So we're waiting again for the budget to be completed to where we can actually see where those line items shake up. The sea level rise package is really one of the main bills that actually passed. A lot of other bills got caught up in these last days and a lot of the tension, like I was saying, between the different groups. Overall, it really became a very partisan, divisive session towards the end. So the transportation package bill, that is still out in the ether. It looks unlikely to pass at this point. We were successful in removing the 25% cap on public transit funding, however, so we were happy about that. We're also waiting to see kind of exactly where transportation disadvantage funding shakes out as well, but we have it on really good authority that they're going to be funding that at it's about 2 million below what the governor had recommended, but it's 2 million more than what they were previously going to be funding it at. So they sort of met us in the middle with that funding, and Broward County was actually already slated to get quite a bit of funding, a funding increase because of the formula change for the trip and equipment grant funding. So this would just be additional on top of that. And so I think that they could potentially appropriate that additional 2 million perhaps in the middle of the year, because there was also a lot of flexibility built into the budget. They did fund the, I believe it was 1 billion for the inflation fund that was proposed by the House. And that would allow them to address cost overages from inflation, et cetera. But again, we'll have a full analysis for everybody once the budget's finally printed and we can actually see where all the different funding in the actual budget itself. And advanced air mobility, a lot of the other, like I said, bills that we've been tracking for everyone just have not made it, and they don't look likely to make it if they're not on the agendas today. And for the most part, it's been crisis averted. We were successful in stopping the preemption on wage mandates that would have affected our TD drivers and our seaport and airport. We were successful in stopping the TNC bill that affected our seaport and airport. And that was all going into, we already knew that those were dead going into this week. And the same with sovereign immunity caps. That bill as well is dead as well. So again, sea level rise really seems to be the main bill that actually made it across the finish line. And that does not include the slip study bill that was sponsored by Representative Hunchofsky that would have required slip studies for inland flooding in addition to the coastal communities. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that just to see if any new developments happen in the next few days, but it seems like it's unlikely to pass at this point too. And with that, I'll take any questions.
My colleagues, any questions? It's a nail biter for sure
Yeah.
on many levels.
And that sales tax holiday for gas tax just for a month.
Correct. It's in October. It would be October 2020. They said that they chose October because they wanted to ensure that it would be locals that were getting that were able to take advantage of the gas tax cut. They didn't want to pick a time when there were going to be a lot of tourists taking advantage of it.
Thank you so much for the report. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And just to add as well, we are continuing to monitor FDOT personnel changes, and we have our ear to the ground to find out exactly what the transition plan would be for Secretary Thibault leaving and who might be coming in as interim, or if they're going to go ahead and appoint someone right away. But we'll keep you guys informed on what we know as we know it.
Lauren, I have my favorites for that, so cross your fingers. But thank you. Keep on watching because that's important. I mean, even Commissioner Alston, who is now on the Broward County Commission, he was chief of staff up at FDOT. He's gone. There were turnovers in all their deputy secretaries. It's been an amazing turnover in central office. So thank you, Lauren. It's going to, obviously that affects policy. So,
well, some of the names we've heard, actually, we think will be pretty great. So we'll keep you guys posted.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. So, moving on to the second one.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to do the second presentation for you. This is on the Metropolitan Transportation Engineering Construction Collaborative. And this is actually also going to be presented to the MPO board. Next slide, please. So if you all remember back to when we had the mayors and elected officials roundtable, we actually had set up through that group a small subcommittee that was of the elected officials to discuss the implementation of transportation projects. It didn't matter the funding source, it was, how can we get things built? And both with our advocacy in expanding what was going to be coming down from Washington and working with the county to expand their surtax. There was really great conversation about how we build things. If you look at some of our CSLIP programs and projects that improved, and we've had, at this point in time, about $120 million of CSLIP projects just moving through the system as we speak. A lot of the issue that our local government partners had previously is actually delivery through what is called the LAP program, and that is administered through the Florida Department of Transportation. It has federal and state requirements that are in there that are very cumbersome for most local governments. You have to have really stable staff over years that understand the different programs and policies. And, we're going to see that stability in staff is going to become harder and harder as the economy improves and as our population grows and as competition with our private sector consulting friends, as they're doing more and more work, you're going to see good morning. You're going to see a lot more interest in, you moved. You're going to see a lot more problems in delivering. So basically, FDOT had been the decision way back in the day to actually deliver projects. And if for those of you who've been on the board for more than 10 years, so that winnows this down very significantly, you'll remember that basically the local governments stopped delivering projects during the last recession. And we had a lot of money that left our region because of the governments weren't able to deliver, whether it was Lauderhill, Lauderdale Lakes, Fort Lauderdale, Deerfield Beach, Pompano, Hollywood, even Davie. There were projects that just had to go back. So, that is really hard for us because when the money leaves from this region, it leaves completely. And I met with Romney Rogers yesterday, who used to serve on the board from Fort Lauderdale. And he asked me about a TAP project that he got approved that unfortunately Cordova Drive, which actually also disappeared. And he goes, "Where did that money go?" And I said, I went and visited it in Destin, and it was a lovely transportation project with beautiful lighting and nice sidewalks. And the folks in Destin really appreciated it. So he laughed, I cried, and then we just moved on. So if you look at the high cost and complexity of delivering these projects, we really need to be able to have a centralized organization that can deliver. Typically in other counties in the state, we don't have this many local governments. So in Hillsborough, you only have 3 local governments and the county. So their mechanisms of delivery are more stable. When you have as many local governments as we have, that stability also falls into play too, because staff moves from one city to another, and even within the region. So that high cost of dealing with that has been very difficult. Typically, a project will cost about $100,000 for each local government to deliver, whether it's a $500,000 project or $1 million project. That cost is about $100,000 immediately. Can you go to the next slide, please? So basically, the subcommittee looked into all these different issues and then said, okay, well, how do we work together to create an entity that would actually be able to help us deliver these projects? So they looked at C Corps, they looked at cooperatives, and they looked at interlocal agreements. Basically, I used to work on this Chapter 163, and there are all these opportunities for us to collaborate, or the cities to collaborate for the delivery of federal projects. Next slide, please. Our good work with our legal team. Actually, Matt did a phenomenal job working on this. And I winnowed it down to actually looking at the Florida Interlocal Cooperative. That's the Chapter 163.01. And that allows local governments to band together to actually provide services. We use that quite often. A lot of local governments use the 163 agreement process. Next slide, please. The legal process is known. It's known to the cities. It's known to all the attorneys here. It's also known to most of the private sector. The flexible structure is really what that 163 agreement allows. So if a person within this cooperative is working on a project, say in Hollywood, and then next month they might be working in a project in Lauderdale Lakes or even in North Lauderdale, then all of a sudden that same staff would be able to move from one project to another seamlessly, knowing consistently what needs to be delivered to meet federal and state requirements, as opposed to the local governments going back and forth. It actually provides a lot of stability even for FDOT's reviews. Next slide, please. So centralizing the engineering expertise is very important. The bid package preparation, also super important, because a bid package, if you don't bid it correctly, you do not get the federal funds because it's based on reimbursement. And yeah, and your local government has then spent the money and you're not getting it back. So at that point, we look to that centralized procurement for all these projects. It would provide efficient and timely project delivery, which is, I think, important both federal government and the state. And it centralizes a public involvement. And that's, I think, also important, because that way we're not doing different public involvement efforts for different projects. So there's that consistency, the 3 C's: consistency, collaboration, and cooperation that happens with all of the projects as they go forward. Basically, the cities themselves would be buying services necessary without the need to maintain staff. So basically MTech would be that organization to maintain some staff. Next slide, please. The idea is to have a self-governing board. It's not the MPO. It is actually a separate organization completely. In dealing with that, it will have that self-governing. It will be self-funding by the members, which right now we have Pompano, Plantation, and Hollywood signed up as the primary members, and they're going to establish the board. And then from there, the board will make decisions how to move forward. The primary funding is ultimately going to be through project awards. So ultimately, it becomes a self-funding vehicle. For the most part, it wouldn't require a lot of participation. And so that board will have to decide the amount of money that it actually will need to move forward. I appreciate Mayor Stoner. You've been on this for a long time with us. And, this whole idea of, bringing in the money initially to set this up is only going to benefit all of our other partners. The municipal member will honestly pay an annual due to cover the overhead, but we believe the overhead will reduce over time as project delivery happens. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, Hollywood, Plantation, and Pompano are the founding members. The board meeting, we're hoping we're going to have an interlocal agreement before you in April with MTech and with these 3 cities. And then we're going to be able to move forward with making this organization stand up. Next slide, please. If you wanted to know some of the money issues, basically the founding members have agreed to pay $100,000 apiece. Non-founding members, which we right now have 4 municipal governments budgeting for non-founding member status at $50,000, and then the annual membership fee is $25,000 with a minimum 5-year commitment. And then that can obviously be adjusted up to the MTech board. Next slide, please. The interlocals have been passed in Hollywood, Plantation, and Pompano. An interlocal between Broward MPO for administrative services, as I said, will come in April. Next slide, please. The purpose of the ILA is to allow consent to authorize the creation of MTech, facilitate the planning, design, and construction of transportation-related projects throughout Broward County, utilizing federal funds, and I want to make sure that that's very clear. Firewall between planning activities of the MPO and design and construction activities of MTech are being created, so that way the MPO assumes no financial responsibility for MTech projects. We've got to be very careful because this organization doesn't, while we have a lot of money, the depth of that money for us to access is limited. Next slide, please. The authorized activities for MTech is the Federal Aid Project Administration, so that's LAP certification. It will provide liability to parties for federal aid project completion. The local project administration includes provisions for services for municipal members, payment for services, and selection for services. Important issue. Next slide, please. LAP certification. Right now, the Department of Transportation is going to require the organization to be LAP certified per project. Our goal is ultimately to have the organization set up where it's LAP certified for the year. It doesn't matter which the project is. Typically, the way the Department of Transportation deals with lab certification is you'll get design money, you get lab certified for design. Then your lab certification goes away, and then they give you construction money, and you go through the whole process all over again to get lab certified. And that's, it's our TIP. So basically, the 5th year, the 3rd year, you get design money. The 1st year, you get construction money. By the time you get to the 1st year, a majority of city staff has either turned over or moved from one place to another, and that always is very problematic. Liability for the parties for federal aid projects on completion. The municipal member requesting the project will still be responsible for non-eligible expenses and cost overruns. Important to point out, we had a project in Deerfield Beach that they wanted to put articulated mats in that were a different color than yellow for the folks that are handicapped, utilizing blind services. And the DOT said, oh my God, we can't change this, from yellow to brown. That took myself, our team members, people over at the department, at the district office, about 3 months. Mr. Good was involved with that. And ultimately, we finally got it done. That's ridiculous. And so the whole idea of bringing this into our world is actually being able to accommodate those changes fast, and also be able to tell the local government, yeah, if you put this type of lighting in, this is a non-eligible use. Do you have it budgeted? So that way it's not something that comes back and bites you later when you go for reimbursement. Next slide, please. Local project administration, the municipal members will always retain the option to use MTech or not. That's, it's not a requirement. Project costs and responsibilities addressing the individual project-based agreements are going to be between FDOT, MTech, and the municipality. The MPO will not be party to any individual project-based agreements and will have no responsibility for funding the project beyond the TIP program funds. Next slide. I'm almost done. We are offering in-house support and contract support with RFP management. Next slide. Founding members approve and sign the ILA. That's underway. Administrative services agreement that you'll see in spring. Draft MTech policies and procedures are being drafted as we speak. MTech operations are expected to start 2nd quarter of 22. Procurement of key consultants and resources will happen in that summer, fall of 22. And the very first MTech projects are from the state are going to start in the fiscal year 23, which is after July. So with that, I think that's our last slide, correct? Next, please. I offer discussion, or, you're going to see this again. So,
Question?
Should I just reserve my questions when we have the meeting?
No.
Or, oh,
Go ahead.
yeah, ask them now.
So the annual fees,
Yes.
there's no differentiation between large cities and small cities.
No. $25,000. So 50 to start, 25 a year.
Well, that's easy for Tamarack, but North Lauderdale, maybe not so much.
That's not.
When it's less than a staff member, exactly. Thank you.
And are you going to have any kind of software to facilitate a lot of these projects?
That's the whole goal, yes. But that's going to be, we'll bring, once that organization has stood up, we'll bring, the folks in and basically show you where they're going to be looking at. But yeah, software is key. Obviously, project software is going to be hugely important.
And is it something that's existing or something that you guys are going to have to put together?
Well, MTech will probably purchase existing softwares that are out there. We're not going to develop something new. Long term, I would expect that they will probably customize it.
And that will be included for the cities to
Have access to, yes.
Okay.
Project management tracking is going to be super important.
Okay.
Thank you, Member Ziani. I think we have Member Stoner. Did you have else? Just turn your mic up. That you do have to press the green. Thank you.
It says it's on. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And you're on.
So as I understand it, though, the 100,000 that we are giving, we work against.
Yes.
So you're not just giving money to start up, you're actually going to be able to work against it. It's basically a retainer. That's why I don't have a problem with giving the 100,000. I know I'm going to work against it. We've had lap projects people pull their hair out. And yeah, they do. And having just, gone through all of our bond projects, the management is so important, and the consistency is what we felt was important here. So that once the person that we give our pay apps to is familiar with the person that's approving and submitting, so they're not trying to work with 31 different people, 31 different cities. We just always felt like consistency was important with the same staff over and over and over. And, but again, the important part of the money is you'll work against it. You don't pay in addition to. Okay.
Excellent. I had a question with the 5-year commitment.
Sure.
So what happens if the city doesn't?
The 5-year commitment?
They say we're going to do it for 5 years. Year 2, nope, don't want to do it anymore.
Hypothetically, that would be a horrible situation. I don't have the answer for that right now.
Does the agreement have language to deal with that
Actually,
issue?
would you like to address that? Matt?
And if it doesn't, I think it should.
There's a dispute resolution process.
Your mic is not on. It's a little big green light somewhere.
There, right?
Got it?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. There's a dispute resolution process.
Can you just state your name for us?
I'm sorry, my name is Matthew Pearl. I'm a partner of Alan over at Weiss Serota. There's a dispute resolution process, but in addition to that, if somebody is delinquent in their payments, then they no longer get to avail themselves of the services of MTech. So theoretically, if they were to have a project and MTech were administering that project, MTech would no longer be processing their payments or doing reimbursements or assisting them with compliance with LAP until they came into compliance with their obligations. And that's the penalty that would be imposed upon them.
So I guess my issue is, for planning purposes, you're asking for a 5-year commitment. So you have an understanding of the flow of what's going to happen within 5 years, but there really is no true commitment. Someone has the ability to go in for a year and say, it really hasn't worked out and we don't want to do it anymore. And yes, they will not be able to use the services, but it is going to have an impact to the others that are within MTech.
It could.
Well, may I?
Yes. Stoner?
I think that's a personal city preference. I think that when you stop after even a year, because the average project takes 2 years, and I do more slap my head than you can imagine. But an average project is 2 years. So you pull out in the middle, you have to find qualified staff immediately. And that is one of the issues across the country. We can't find qualified people, no matter what we offer to pay them. It's hard. So I think having that option is one thing, but following through with walking away, you need to decide when it's okay to walk away after a project or whatever. You can always come back in later.
No, to my point was, when we make a statement that it's a 5-year commitment,
Yes.
It's more of an understanding that it's a 5-year commitment, but there's nothing that will preclude a municipality from backing out. And so I'm always concerned about, a finite statement that says you're in it like a 5-year mortgage. No, there's an understanding. There's like a memorandum of understanding, so to speak. But I'm also concerned about those left within the MTech and how somebody pulling out would have a potential to impact them. So if you have 3 municipalities and one pulls out, would that adversely impact the other 2 that are left, or their financial contribution is sufficient to sustain whatever it is that they're doing?
Well, there's
And I'm going to ask the
and
director.
okay, all right.
The mayor was going to say that's where the drawdown. So there's actually built-in security with membership. It's like, all right, well, you have this, so then we recognize you. It'll draw down the cost. You don't get that back.
Correct. Right. Okay. So there's just, I just want to make sure that we're clear with everyone when they're participating. Any further questions from the board?
Just
Yes.
one last comment.
Yes, Member Stoner.
Remember that as this grows and the investment in the software and the staff, that's where people withdrawing affects everybody, because we're not just budgeting for that. It's a full-blown office with everything. And that's and of course we're not allowed to make money, which has always been in my background. I want to make some money, but we can figure out how to spend it, but spend it wisely and appropriately back into the MTech. So, okay.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Kaleka.
Good morning, Brian Kaleka, Broward MPO. I just wanted to mention that I've had very candid conversations with staffs from almost every municipality at this point. And even the most competent of staff do not want to get lab certified. So I would believe that nobody's going to withdraw because the benefit is so great.
The glass half full, glass half empty kind of scenario.
Well, and the if you don't mind, Madam Chair,
Yes.
that glass half full, don't forget, we're going to even have more water coming into that glass because of the federal government bill. So it's going to be pouring out and all over the place.
Need a picture.
Yeah.
Okay. I know we're getting close to the regular time for the meeting. Do we need to go through the rest of the agenda, the discussion of I know we have the agenda for today, which obviously we're just going to get into, and then we have April 14th. Is there anything that you feel? necessary?
The only thing I want to mention for today that is going to happen is we're making an amendment to the TIP section that's removing 2 items, and it's through strike through. So you'll see that as that moves forward. But other than that, we'll cross the bridge on April 14th when we get there.
Okay.
Okay.
So seeing none, further discussion, the executive committee meeting stands adjourned, and our next meeting is April 14th, and we will start our MPO meeting roughly in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Great. Thanks for coming in early.
It's 9:30.
It was cold. It was 28 degrees outside. Oh my God. So we had to pretend it was nice and warm for the cameras, but
Good job. Good job.